I've seen many killers in my years investigating homicides, but few as calculating, as cold, and as deceptively ordinary as the woman they called Nyonya Astini. They say never push a desperate person to their breaking point. In the quiet alleys of Surabaya, 3 women learned that lesson far too late. They came to collect debts and left in body bags, scattered in pieces across a city that had no idea a serial killer lived among them. Born in 1955 in Jombang, East Java, Astini Sumiasih grew up in a post-colonial Indonesia, where poverty wasn't just common, it was a way of life. Her parents, like many at the time, worked long hours for little pay, leaving Astini to be raised mostly by an older sibling. Neighbors described her as a ghost of a child, quiet, distant, always watching. One local recalled, she was physically present, but not emotionally there, like she was just surviving. She never got the emotional warmth or security a child needs, and from that absence, something began to grow, something hollow, something dark. As she entered adulthood, Astini found work sewing plastic tarpaulins for rickshaw roofs. It wasn't much, but it paid for rice. She married a man named Sufirin, an honest man with no steady job, and together they rented a cramped house in Surabaya's Kampung Malang Utara for our neighborhood. They had 3 children, and like many families scraping by, they lived day by day, always one unpaid bill away from disaster. With little income and 3 mouths to feed, Astini turned to her neighbors for help. Small loans at first, 5,000 rupiah, then 20,000, then 100,000. Her neighbors sympathized with her. After all, she was a mother. She was polite, soft-spoken, the kind of person you trusted without question. But as her debts multiplied, so did the tension. She would borrow from one neighbor to pay another, then borrow again and again. The cycle spiraled. By 1992, she owed Rahayu 1.25 million rupiah. She owed Sri Astutik over 550,000. Puji Astutik, another kind neighbor, had lent her 20,000. The amounts might seem small now, but back then, in Surabaya, they were enough to shatter friendships, enough to kill for. August 1992. It was monsoon season in Surabaya, the kind of heat that clings to your skin. Rahayu had been patient, too patient. She walked to Astini's home one afternoon, demanding repayment. Voices rose, harsh words were exchanged. Rahayu accused her of dishonesty. Astini didn't scream, didn't fight. She simply smiled and invited Rahayu inside. The guest sat near the window, still expecting her money, but Astini came from behind. In a flash of rage, she struck her across the skull with a heavy object. No one saw, no one heard. She didn't panic, she didn't cry. She wrapped the body, fetched a blade, and cut it into pieces. The parts were scattered. Riverbanks, dumpsters, alleyways. The perfect crime, carried out by a housewife. Rahayu's family reported her missing. But without a body or a suspect, the police had nothing. A year passed. Astini continued borrowing, continued smiling, continued cooking meals for her children over the same stove where she had washed blood off her hands. On November 1st, 1993, the pattern repeated. This time the victim was Sri Astutik Wijaya. She too came demanding repayment, and she too ended up dismembered. No one connected the dots. No one remembered that both women had visited the same house before they vanished. And so, Astini continued her double life. Killer by night, mother by day. The horror. She got better at it. Cleaner, faster. Her husband and children never suspected a thing. February 4th, 1996. Surabaya's skies were dark. The air heavy with the smell of rain, Puji Astutik arrived on a motorcycle. She wanted her 20,000 rupiah. But this time, neighbors noticed the argument. Astini looked agitated. Puji shouted. As always, Astini invited her inside, said she'd get the money. Instead, she came back with an iron rod. She struck Puji from behind, over and over, until silence returned to the room. She wrapped the body in a mat, cleaned the blood, hid the corpse behind the kitchen. At 2 a.m., while her family slept, she dismembered the body into 10 parts. The bags were scattered across Surabaya, some in trash bins, some in the Wonorejo River. But this time, she made a mistake. On February 5th, a human head was found floating in the river. The police were called. At Dr. Soetamo Hospital, the victim was identified by Puji's brother. A witness came forward. Puji was last seen at Astini's house. Police knocked on her door. She acted surprised. But the calm didn't last long. During questioning, Astini confessed, not just to killing Puji, but to the murders of Rahayu and Shri years earlier. What shocked investigators the most wasn't the crimes. It was her demeanor, cold, clinical, unshaken. She reenacted the murders step by step, methodical in her explanations, showing where the rod was hidden, where the bodies were dismembered. This wasn't rage. This was control, precision, practice. On October 17, 1996, the court found her guilty of 3 counts of premeditated murder. She was sentenced to death by firing squad. But the story didn't end there. From prison, Astini launched a series of appeals to the High Court, the Supreme Court, even the President. Every request was denied. For nearly 9 years, she lived on death row, waiting. March 15, 2005. Astini was moved to Medang Detention Center. She spent her last 5 days in isolation. On her final day, she ate a meal of bread, squid, and fruit. She wrote 3 farewell letters, contents still unknown. At 1:20 a.m., March 20th, she was executed by 12 Bri mob officers. 6 bullets, 1 chest, no last words. Astini's home still stands today in Surabaya. Neighbors say it feels cursed. Some say it still smells like blood. The kitchen, where 3 bodies were dismembered, remains unused. Her 3 children were taken in by a man named Andreas Nurmandala, who raised them through high school despite public shame. Her story is still discussed in law schools, on TV shows, and around dinner tables. The case reopened public debate on capital punishment and the psychological impact of poverty. What drives someone to murder? Is it desperation? Pride? The slow erosion of hope? Maybe it's all 3. Nyonya Astini didn't kill for pleasure. She killed because she couldn't face what she had become. A failed mother, a failed provider, a woman drowning in shame. Her story is not just about horror. It's a warning. A study in the consequences of unchecked suffering, and perhaps a reflection of how thin the line can be between neighbor and monster. Thank you for watching Indonesia Crime Files. If you found this story compelling, disturbing, or unforgettable, like, share, and subscribe, because sometimes the most terrifying killers don't hide in shadows. They smile, they borrow, and they live next door.